You're listening to Psychology of the Strange, a podcast exploring the psychology behind fear, folklore, the uncanny, and the unexplained. This show is brought to you by the Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side. It always starts the same way. Someone posts a story online. Just a paragraph, maybe a photo, maybe a video that looks a little too real and a little too wrong. The comments fill up fast. People argue about whether it's fake, whether it's edited, or whether someone knows the person who swears it's real. And then it spreads. It shows up on other accounts, other platforms, other languages. The details shift. The monster changes. The location moves. But the feeling stays the same. That quiet, creeping sense that something is watching. Slender Man in the woods. The back rooms behind reality. The black-eyed children at the door. A government secret no one is allowed to see. We call these things urban legends, conspiracy theories, creepypasta, internet horror. But if you strip away the screens, the comment sections, and the algorithms, you're left with something ancient, something long before the internet. We were already telling these stories. We just told them by firelight. When people hear the word folklore, they think of fairy tales in old books or with old gods, old worlds. But folklore isn't old. Folklore is alive, and at its core, folklore is shared meaning created in uncertainty. It's a story that spreads, not because it's true, but because it feels true. Because it explains something that logic can't quite reach. Because it warns us or binds us together. Folklore emerges in the spaces where certainty collapses, when people don't have the answers, when science, religion, or authority fails to explain what's happening. The mind reaches for narratives, and those stories become a way to contain the unknown. It also thrives when authority can't be trusted, when institutions lie, contradict themselves, or simply disappear. Stories step in to fill up the gap. Folklore becomes this parallel system of knowledge, one built not on evidence, but on collective intuition. These stories spread because they feel emotionally true. And folklore grows most powerful when danger is invisible, when the threats can't be seen, named, or located. Stories give those dangers a face. And once fear has a form, it can be shared, warned against, and talked about. We can tolerate fear, and we can tolerate pain. But prolonged ambiguity is just exhausting. Folklore offers relief by turning this uncertainty into a story, by turning the we don't know into this is what's happening. And in that way, folklore isn't a failure of reason, but a survival response, a way of holding meaning together when the world no longer makes sense. So we build the stories, not to deceive ourselves, but to survive the unknown. And every time technology changes, folklore changes with it. Campfires became taverns, and now folklore lives in feeds and forums and comment sections. The internet didn't create folklore. It accelerated it and distorted it and made it impossible to contain. There's an old story people used to tell at sleepovers or on long drives. It was usually pretty late when someone said, "Wait, have you heard this one?" And it goes like this. A couple parks at the edge of town, somewhere quiet. Maybe it was a lookout or a dirt road. One of those places teenagers go when they want to feel alone. The radio hums low, windows cracked, night pressing in from all sides. Then the music cuts. A news bulletin interrupts. There's been an escape. A man from the nearby hospital. Dangerous, unstable. Last seen in the woods. Police warn residents to stay inside. The girl laughs it off. The guy says nothing. But the air feels different now. It's too quiet, and every sound seems too loud. A branch snapping, something brushing the car. She says they should leave. He says they're fine. Then, tap, soft, metal against glass. They freeze, but there's nothing there. He says it's probably just a tree. It's probably nothing. She urges him to go check it out. And then the tap, the scrape a little louder this time. But neither one of them is laughing anymore. They drive home fast. Maybe a little too fast. They don't talk, and when they pull into her driveway, he gets out to open the door. And that's when he sees it. Hanging from the handle, scratched deep into the paint. A rusted hook, still swaying. Urban legends are the closest thing we have to traditional folklore. They're cautionary tales with warnings dressed as stories. Nobody in that story ever sees the man. Well, that's not true. Sometimes they do, in the darker tellings. But the suggestion that something was close enough to touch the car, close enough to leave a mark, that's the point. They just move it closer, from the woods to the road to the door handle, until suddenly the danger isn't out there. It's right next to you. They're about spaces that feel familiar, but can also feel unsafe. Cars and highways, parking lots, suburbs at night. In the older folklore, danger lived in forests and crossroads. Now it lives in the spaces we thought we controlled. Urban legends are how a culture teaches itself where not to go, who not to trust, and what happens when you break the rules. They spread because they carry a message. Be careful. Stay alert. The world is not as safe as you think. And the more uncertain the world becomes, the more these stories multiply. And if urban legends warn us about strangers, conspiracies warn us about systems. They tell us someone is in control, someone is pulling the strings, someone knows the truth, and they're not telling us. Area 51, MK Ultra, lizard people and secret societies, and of course, the shadow government. In a world that feels chaotic and unfair, conspiracy theories do something comforting. They draw a line between good and evil. They give fear a face. They turn randomness into intention. And they make suffering mean something. And if that sounds familiar, it should, because ancient folklore was filled with gods who manipulated fate, tricksters who deceived, Demons who whispered lies and hidden realms that operated beyond human reach. Conspiracies are just folklore where the monster is power itself. There's a story that drifts through the internet every few years. It never really disappears. It just resurfaces. Someone posts it, someone screenshots it, someone comments, "Wait, I thought this one was real." And I'm someone, I thought this story was real when I first heard it. It doesn't read like a ghost story. It reads like a report. It's cold, it's clinical, like something you weren't meant to find. According to the story, it happened in the late 1940s. Soviet researchers sealed 5 political prisoners inside a chamber and pumped in an experimental gas designed to keep them awake. The deal was simple: stay awake for 15 days, and then they'd be released. At first, nothing seemed wrong. The prisoners talked, they laughed, they read books aloud to pass the time. But by the 3rd day, the laughter stopped. By the 4th, the conversations turned strange. Whispered confessions, paranoid accusations, long speeches directed at guards who never responded. By the 5th day, they stopped looking at each other. They tore pages from the books and smeared them over the observation windows, not to escape, but to avoid being seen. On the 8th day, the microphones picked up nothing. No movement, no voices, just silence. The researchers assumed the equipment had failed, until one of the prisoners leaned toward the microphone and spoke in a calm and exhausted voice. "We don't want to be released." When the gas was finally shut off and the chamber opened, the soldiers hesitated. The smell reached them first. Rot, blood, something sweet and wrong. The food rations inside were untouched. The prisoners were not. Skin was torn away, muscle exposed, wounds that looked self-inflicted. One man was still alive, sitting in the corner, smiling through teeth that shouldn't have been visible. When they tried to sedate him, he fought with a strength that broke bones. As the drugs took hold, he screamed the same sentence over and over: "I must remain awake." Later, when the survivors were told they would be put back to sleep, they panicked. They begged not for freedom, but for the gas. One of them looked at a researcher and asked almost gently, "Don't you want to see what happens when you stop pretending?" The report ends the way all these stories do. No survivors, no records, just a leaked file. Maybe it happened. Maybe it didn't. But once you read it, the story sticks. And that story isn't traditional folklore. It doesn't come from a village or a grandmother. It came from a forum, a creepypasta thread, probably written by one person at a keyboard at 2 a.m. And still, people remember it like history. Because creepypasta doesn't try to sound like a fairy tale. It tries to sound like evidence, a document or a leak, something real that slipped through the cracks. And psychologically, that's kind of terrifying. Because when a story feels unfinished, when it reads like a report instead of a myth, your brain treats it differently. Not as a fiction, but as possibility, which means the monster isn't a witch or a demon anymore. It's an authority, the people that were running the experiment, which is somehow so much worse. Creepypasta is where folklore becomes collaborative. These stories are written to be shared, copied, edited, and reposted, not owned, not finished or stable. Slender Man didn't belong to anyone. Neither does the Russian sleep experiment. These stories are born unfinished and become real through repetition. They live in the tension between real and fake, deliberately blurring the line so the reader is never really sure whether what they're consuming is fiction, a hoax, or something accidentally true. Then there's a newer layer, where folklore knows it's folklore. Videos that shouldn't exist, analog horror, stories that respond when you interact. This is folklore in a self-aware age. We know it might be fake, and we don't care because participation is the point. These stories give us something older generations had, but we lost. A shared sense of mystery. A place where uncertainty is allowed to exist without being solved. And that's important because modern life doesn't leave much room for mystery anymore. Everything is explained, measured, tracked, and optimized. So we create spaces where reality breaks on purpose. Folklore changes when the world changes. As new dangers emerge, old monsters stop making sense, and new ones take their place to give shape to unfamiliar fears. When the spaces we inhabit change from forests and villages to cities, highways and digital worlds, folklore follows us there, embedding itself in the environments where anxiety now lives. And when power structures change, when authority becomes distant, abstract, or invisible, folklore adapts to reflect that too, transforming gods and demons into systems and hidden forces that feel just as uncontrollable. In this way, folklore is not static tradition, but a living psychological mirror, constantly updating itself to reflect where fear, uncertainty, and meaning now reside. Our ancestors feared the woods. We like to think we're more rational now, more advanced, less superstitious. But folklore never disappeared. It just learned how to upload itself, because folklore isn't about belief. It's about belonging, about uncertainty, about meaning in the dark. And every generation builds the stories it needs to survive its fears. So the next time you scroll past a story that makes your stomach drop just a little, a video that feels wrong in a way you can't explain, a comment thread arguing about what's real, remember, you're not witnessing something new. You're sitting at the fire, listening to the same old stories, told in a new voice. And the fire never goes out, and you're left wondering, is this just a story, or could there be a kernel of truth behind it?